Hello viewers, welcome to BikeGremlin YouTube channel. I'm doing a voiceover of the video that was originally recorded in Serbo-Croatian in case it helps someone who doesn't speak the language. This video is about looking over a second-hand bicycle. I will explain how to check a second-hand bicycle, what to look out for, and that's it. Let's start. When I look at a second-hand bicycle, the first thing that is important is the first impression, both of the bicycle and of the salesperson as well. Do they look like they're trying to hide something or just give you a lemon, as the English say? Or is everything looking okay? This intuition is important and people should rely on it, because sometimes even I, as an experienced mechanic, cannot always put a finger on what the problem is, but the first impression, if I get something that is looking suspicious, that intuition usually turns out to be the correct one. If everything is okay at the first impression, the next thing to look out is symmetry. Is everything nicely placed in line? Is the frame well arranged? Nothing is out of place. This is important for bicycle, for ride. When riding the bicycle, it has to handle properly. If something is bent, especially frame, it's usually a bit difficult to repair, especially if the frame is not a steel one. The next thing to look out for is the frame itself. Look at the bicycle second-hand when you're buying it in daylight, if it is at all possible manageable. If there's no daylight, make sure the lighting is as good as possible, and even in low light conditions, if you have to look at a bicycle in such conditions, which is not recommended, it's best to run your fingers along the frame's tubing. That will tell you if there are any dents or paint burrs or any other damage. Any damage to a bicycle's tubing in terms of dents or cracks is very difficult to repair usually, and I would exclude such bicycles from buying, because changing the frame is very expensive. If the frame looks okay and if the paint is not chipped and there's no corrosion, on carbon fiber frames even corrosion is not visible on the outside. Chipped paint will cause the frame to delaminate on the inside, so it's not always visible. Those are some things to watch out for in terms of frames. Now here I'm looking at wheels. When looking at a second-hand bicycle, it's best to have some sort of arrangement so that nothing is missed. You have some sort of a checklist, write yourself, and look at all the parts along that, so you don't forget to look at something. Here I'm looking at the wheels first. I'm looking first at the tires for any cracks, and now here I'm looking at rim, because this is a rim brake bicycle. If in case the rim is worn, you will feel a sort of indentation on its side where the pads rub the rim. If it is more than 1 millimeter deep, the rim is usually can be considered soon fit for replacement. Next, I'm looking at any play in this wheel's bearings. I'm trying to rock and left right this wheel, and I can see it's moving, tilting, and there is some play in the bearings. When the bearings have play, especially if they are cup and cone ones, it could turn out that the hub is damaged, and usually the cheapest solution is to replace the whole wheel. Definitely, if the bearings are damaged, the hub has to be changed. That means relacing the wheel with a new hub. If you're paying for it, it can add up and be expensive. Next thing, I'm checking for spoke tension. All the spokes at one side of a wheel should have similar tension, with no very tight or very loose spokes. And here I'm pulling two pairs of spokes parallel together. It's best done using gloves. And if spokes break or start making strange sounds when I'm doing this, that means that there is some problem with the wheel. Also, make sure to check if there are any cracks where the spokes enter the rim near the nipples, because that is also another area where if there are any cracks, they are very thin, like a hairline thick, or even less visible. If the rim is dirty, you need to clean it and check, because if there are any cracks, the rim is fit for replacement. You should expect that. For deciding whether to buy the bicycle or not, get the good idea of all the things that are fit for replacement, and see in your local area what the prices of those parts and labor are, so that you can then judge for yourself whether the purchase is a good one, or it's better to look for another bicycle. In the description of this video, I have posted links on my website in English that explain this in even more detail. This is just a video demonstration of how to look over a bicycle. This same procedure should be done with the rear wheel as well. Just pay attention that for multi-speed bicycles, the tension of right-hand side spokes is normally higher than the tension of left-hand side spokes, but the tension of the adjacent spokes on the same side of the wheel should be very similar or equal. Now, while I'm at the front of the bicycle, I'm also using the opportunity to see if there's any play in the brakes, and I'm also using a brake as a reference to check if the wheel is true. This wheel is wobbly a bit. It is either because of the big play in its bearings, or uh, in addition to that, the wheel needs truing. But this hub is probably damaged because it's a second-hand bicycle and there is a lot of play in it, so it's been ridden with that much play. So the cones, it's a Shimano cup and cone hub. The cones are probably damaged when there is this much play, and uh, if the cups are not damaged, then you can just replace the cones and the hub will be good to go, and of course bearing balls. But if the cups are also damaged, then the only solution is to relace the wheel, or buy a completely new wheel if you want to change the rim as well, if the rim is not in top condition without any wear. Again, depending on the prices of the parts and labor, there are several solutions, or again, looking at a completely another bicycle. Wheels that use cartridge bearings are a bit more robust in these terms, because there is no uh, cone damage that renders the whole hub useless, because the whole system of the bearing, including both cup and cone in a cartridge, can be removed and replaced. Of course, sometimes the place where the bearing sits, its seating, also gets damaged. That is not very often the case if it has been always properly replaced and serviced, but if that is the case, even such hubs can be rendered, so to say, irreparable. When looking at the wheels, also check the tire for any bulges or cracks on the sidewalls, especially, because that means that the tire is fit for replacement and not safe for riding. Now the next thing I'm looking at is the front fork. This is a suspension fork, and if a bicycle is full suspension one, the rear fork will also be a suspension. And the thing to check is whether the suspension works properly. Look at the dust seals, see if there is oil leaking some, so that's not a good sign. If the just the I'm looking for the correct English term, the seal is damaged, it can be replaced, but if the stick that the seal slides on has some burrs or any scratches, that means that even a new seal will not prevent oil from leaking. This one is air inflated shock absorber, but it seems to not be working properly. It's not moving up and down. Shock absorber should move up and down in nice even way, so when you press on the front brake and load the bars, it should slide down gradually and then come back gradually without any sudden jumps or without locking, unless it's locked, of course, in its lock position. Some have that option. This front shock shock absorber is in very bad condition, and it's been later determined that it's beyond repair. Now I'm looking at play in this V brake. Brakes should always be checked if they look fine, if they move fine. And this one has a bit of play, but it's nothing really bad. And with new pads and setting up the cable tension, they should be made to work properly. There I'm testing if everything moves in and out correctly. There can be sometimes problems with the cable housing, so that is the reason why brakes do not move nicely. In that case, you can just detach the cable and see if the brake calipers themselves, when moved by hand, are moving nice and smoothly. It's sort of a troubleshooting procedure when you see some fault on a bicycle to determine how much really is the problem and how much it would cost to repair it. Or if you want to be on the safe side, just if you see a problem, look for a bicycle that has no problem, that's been fixed, because all the cheap problems are usually fixed by the sales persons because they don't want to lose any customers because of a problem that is cheap and simple to fix, while the more expensive problems are often said, oh, that's just a cheap repair, but it really is not. Here I'm testing fork bearings with a bit of difficulty, obviously. Not the okay, now I'm letting it rock left and right. This is the way it should look, moving nicely, smoothly left and right without locking. It's not bad. It can be better. And I had also previously tried to rock the bicycle forward and backward, holding my finger near the bearings and the tube, the steering tube of the frame, to see if there's any rocking and any play in the bearings. That is the way to check if bearings need replacement. This is where I put my finger while rocking the bicycle forward and backward, holding the front wheel locked. Sorry, holding the front brake locked. These bearings do not look perfect. Maybe they will be fine after just cleaning and lubing, and maybe they will need to be completely replaced. A decent set of bearings in my country is about 10 euros. Rear brake has a lot of travel. Now I'll need to look at the situation on the rear wheel. I did not show looking over the rear wheel in this part of the video, but what I did looking at the front wheel should be done to check the rear wheel as well. Here I'm looking just at the brakes. These brakes have pads that are very worn, and as I will show, the brake surface area of the rim is very worn, so this rim is nearing its replacement times and the brakes are not moving very smoothly. Sometimes that can be fixed by just lubricating and cleaning them, which was the case with this bicycle, as it later turned out, since it got a full service. Now I'm looking in detail, trying to show the important parts in the rear wheel. Rocking the rear wheel left and right shows there is no play in it, which is good. Afterwards, it turned out that the cups and cones are spotless, but what I'm worried about is completely worn brake pads and easily felt by a finger groove in the rim's brake pad area. The way to see how deep the groove is by placing a flat tool or something, ruler on it, and seeing the gap. Not sure if it is visible very well in this video because of zoom, but there is quite a substantial gap here, and this rim is near the time when it needs to be replaced. So I would, because there is no play in the hub, I would consider this wheel fine with a rim change, not complete wheel change. That's not too bad, but it's not perfect. After having tested the frame, the wheels, tires, and brakes, it's time to check the shifters to see if they are working and shifting smoothly and quickly. I'm testing both the front and the rear shift. First I will be testing the front shifter. With shifters, when I'm testing them, I also check the derailleurs to see if there's any play in them and if they're set up nice and parallel and at optimal height compared to the chainrings, because I want to determine if there is some slow shifting, what the reason is, whether a component needs to be changed or is it just poor tuning. This shifter seems to be moving nicely, but it's not shifting very quickly. It could be due to cables or with some problems with the shifter lever, as it turned out later. I will show it in just a moment. Here I'm checking for any play and looking if it's nicely aligned. Now this shifter lever needed to be opened and cleaned and relubricated, and then it started working properly. This is not something that all the people can do at home, and not something all the mechanics want to do when it's the mid-season and they are busy. So a probable answer might be, when you take such bike to a service shop, this shifter is not working well. You see this lever tends to drop. There it was, all the way without trying to make a shift. That used to happen a lot. So the answer of a mechanic would usually be you need to replace it. But in this particular case, I had managed to open it, clean it, lubricate it, and it's still working as of today after about, I think it's been almost a year since I made this video original. Now I'm testing the rear shifting. Apart from seeing if it shifts smoothly, and especially in case it doesn't shift smoothly, try to see if the rear derailleur has any play. If there's any damage in shifters or housing, that can also cause problems. And if the rear derailleur is not bent or damaged, or its hanger. In this case, as you can see from this angle, it's pretty parallel and it's working okay. There I'm testing it without turning the wheel, just to see if the front shifter doesn't have any problems that the rear one had, that it doesn't want to try and make a shift at every pull of the lever. Now I'm looking at, in this part, at cables, at housings, going along them, touching them with my fingers, checking their surface if there's any cracks or anything similar. Trying to see if cables are rusty, if they are moving smoothly, and then I will look over chain rings and the chain. New cables and housing don't cost a lot, depending on the labor prices where in your city, and they are considered a consumable part, but it's better if you don't have to change them right away, of course. Like I said in about many other aspects, it is to the buyer to check if the purchase price is good one and if it's worth, depending on how much investment is needed. Apart from being front chainrings, wear can be determined by looking at them, as is shown in the links I provided with this video. But for cassette, there is no reliable method of just looking at them to know whether they are worn or not. It is best done when you try to ride the bicycle to see if it's keeping. But excessive wear of cassette is visible. Only very excessive extreme wear of a cassette is visible. But if the cassette look fine, it doesn't mean it will work nicely until a test ride. So take that into account. Here I'm watching and testing if rear derailleur springs sorry, are working properly, and if there's much play in it. This one seems quite okay. I'm also looking at the chain stays here to see if they have any damage or cracks. Also, when looking at the frame, I forgot to mention that look near the places, there I'm showing it, near the places where the welds are, at all the places where tubing is connected, there can be cracks. They usually happen in those places, while the other places usually have dents or damaged paint. Here this angle shows nicely the welds of the bicycle where the cracks usually happen. Now I'll look at the pedals and the front chainrings. Here I'm checking pedals for any play. These have a bit of a play, they are not new, but they can still run, they can still be used. This bicycle is planned for recreational riding, mostly on flats, even though it's a mountain bike with a front suspension. So for that use, they will work. They are of decent quality. Perhaps even a service and re-lubrication of the pedals can help them lose play. They are showing where crank arms often crack near the place where the pedal is connected to the crank arm. So especially at the top side, check for any hairline or thinner cracks, and also at the places where the cranks are connected to the axle. Especially goes for cranks that are used for with square taper axles. This one is Shimano Octalink axle and bottom bracket. And here I'm testing them for play, moving them forward, away and towards the bicycle, left, right, trying to see if there's any play. In case there is play, it's probably the time to replace the bottom bracket bearing. And these Shimano Octalink bottom bracket bearings cost about 15 euros in Serbia, plus the labor charges. There I'm showing how the chainring teeth look. They should be symmetrical and not resemble shark fins or a saw blade fins, because that means they are very much worn. And I will include a link in this video's comments showing what a worn chainring looks like and what effect it causes. Chain suck, to name it. Now is the time to check the chain for wear. For this I'm moving it to the smallest chaining at the rear, which is not that crucial, but the crucial part is moving it to the largest front chaining. And then at about 3 o'clock, looking from the right hand side of the bicycle, I'm trying to lift the chain off the chainring. If the whole tooth is visible, that means the chain is worn and it's due for replacement. In this case, this chain is about it looks quite fine. I cannot move it no matter how much I pull, so that a whole tooth of a chain at 3 o'clock is visible. So this chain is okay, which means unless it's skipping on the cassette that is on the bicycle, which will be determined by a test ride, which means that the cassette is also fine and not worn. And if there is no chain suck, apart from looking visually at the state of the front chainrings, it is a guarantee that the front chainrings are not too worn and due for replacement. This sums up looking at all the bicycle parts of this bicycle. And the next thing to do, if you are pleased with it and have checked the brakes on without riding it to see if they are working at all, in that case it is safe to try a test ride and see if the bicycle fits you in a test ride and if it feels right. In case it doesn't, it's best to look for another bicycle. Of course, it's obvious, because you buy a bicycle to ride it nicely. Not sure how to put it in English, but that's the point. Hope you understand. And also another thing to do after or before a test ride is to write down all the things that need to be replaced and see how much it costs. Check with some mechanic perhaps for the quote on prices. In this case I was explaining in short before having serviced the bicycle. At that time I find the front shifter suspicious and perhaps needing a change, as well as the front fork, which was changed for this bicycle because it was beyond repair, too much neglect. And everything else on the bicycle was in very good condition, except the front bearing, front wheel bearing, which also needed cone replacement. The fork bearing turned out to be okay, just needed some lubrication. I also explain in this part of the video why this ahead system of threadless forks is safer than quill stems of the old standards, but that is another topic that will be explained perhaps in a separate video and definitely on my website. Once I find the time, I'm trying to do all the topics that I find interesting and that I think could help people, and that's it. Thank you for watching. You can like and subscribe. I'll try to make some videos in English and definitely to synchronize all the videos in Serbo-Croatian to English so that they can help someone who doesn't speak the language. Cheers.